Urbanization is the process of becoming urban. In other words, it is a demographic process whereby an increasing proportion of the population of a region or a country lives in urban areas. It is a characteristic of economically advancing nations where it is occurring at much faster rate than it did historically in the developed, mainly the Western world. Urbanization linked to industrialization. In general usage, urbanization is associated with the concentration of population in towns and cities. There are, however, three linked concepts which are associated with urbanization. These are: 1. Demographic phenomena, 2. Structural change in society, and 3. Urbanization as a behavioral process. As a demographic phenomena, urbanization is interpreted as a process involving the absolute and relative growth of towns and cities within a defined area, usually a country. This is often represented as taking place in two stages. First, an increasing proportion of the population is resident in urban places, and second, the proportion living in the largest places increases. The end of the sequence is presented as an almost completely urbanized society, with the great majority of its population living in a few large places. Linked with the demographic process is the structural change in the society consequent upon the development of industrial capitalism. Cities are presented in the foci of the exchange processes that are central to this mode of production. With the latter, the search for increases in productivity led to the development of urban factories to reap the economies of scale advantages to be gained from the processes of concentration and centralization. The third concept associated with urbanization is that urbanization as a behavioral process. On completion of this module, you would be able to understand the basis of urban settlement and also understand the origin and growth of urbanization. Urban areas, especially large cities, have been identified as centers of social change, attitude, values and behavior patterns are modified in the particular milieu of the urban place, characterized by its size, its density and the heterogeneity of its inhabitants, which we usually call urbanism, and then spread to the rest of the population by process of diffusion through the urban systems. In this expanded view of urbanizations, the demographic component is presented as the dependent variable, the outcome of economic processes. It is the structural component that provides the driving force, since it is the search for scale economies that leads to the need for cities in order of economic development to proceed. The behavioral component is also in a secondary position in the model, with social change presented as an outcome of the creation of large cities. The three components interact, that is, demographic growth stimulates structural change through multiplier effects and behavioral changes attract immigrants, but the basis of urbanization is economic change and in particular the growth of large scale production. This model of urbanization has been challenged in recent years on a number of grounds, most of them relating to the central role of the growth of factory production. First, it is pointed out that there were large cities in other parts of the world, notably Asia and Africa, long before the Industrial Revolution. Moreover, rapid demographic urbanization of Northwest Europe, city growth is not dependent on the factory alone. Second, in many of the more advanced countries, demographic urbanization has halted and the larger places are in decline. late capitalism does not necessarily require the continued concentration of population. Third one, in many of the less developed capitalist countries, the pace of demographic utilization is more outrunning the pace of industrialization, and thus city growth is taking place without a central role for the factory. Demographic urbanization thus comes about for a variety of reasons as part of the structuring of space within a social formation. There is no reason to suppose that what is typical of one time and place is necessarily typical of others. Urban generally means relating to cities and towns. Towns are of many different sizes, ranging from small country towns, sometimes smaller than village elsewhere, to enormous sprawling cities with several million inhabitants. So, what distinguishes town from rural settlement is not their size, but the economic activities of their inhabitants. The major economic activities in towns pertain to industries, trade, commerce and services. The definition of urban settlement is, however, a difficult one. Most of the countries define their urban settlements on the basis of a minimum qualifying size of population. The size may vary from country to country and from plain regions to mountainous and desert regions. The criteria of functions, administrative status, layout and amenities are also combined with the criterion of minimum size of population. In Israel, a town, irrespective of its size of population, is a non-agricultural settlement, while in Chile, a town is a center with urban characteristics. The simplest definition for urban settlement are those which merely go by size. Example, in Canada, all settlements with more than 1,000 populations are called urban. In Colombia, the dividing line between rural and urban is 1,500. In Argentina, the settlements above 2,000 persons are urban, and in USA, urban settlements have more than 2,500 people. In most of the Asian countries like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand and Indonesia, villages may be so large that an even greater figure of population has to be qualified. In UK, a settlement is designated as urban on the basis of local government such as borough, municipal boroughs and urban districts. In India, in the census of 1991, the urban settlements have been defined on the basis of the following criteria: all places with a municipality, corporation, cantonment board or notified town area committee, etc. All other places which satisfy the following criteria, that is: 1. A minimum population of 5,000 people, 2. At least 75% of the male working population engaged in non-agricultural pursuits, and the third one, a density of population of at least 400 persons per square kilometer. In addition, the marginal cases such as project colonies, areas of intensive industrial development, railway colonies, important tourist centers, etc. come in the category of urban. Apart from these, the outgrowths of cities and towns have also been treated as urban. It may be noticed from the above that in India there are two distinct types of urban units. One, the places which have come into existence by virtue of statutory notifications and are referred to be the nomenclature adopted in the relevant notifications as municipal corporation, municipal board, cantonment board, notified area committee, etc. And the third one, the places which are defined as urban because they satisfy criteria and are referred to as census towns or non-municipal towns. Thus, the definition of an urban center is highly variable from country to country. In order to make the international data comparable, the United Nations in 1958 suggested that the data of urban population should also be presented according to a standardized scale. Consequently, many of the countries have further classified their urban settlements into a number of categories on the basis of population size. In accordance with this recommendation of the United Nations, the Census of India also classifies the urban places into the following 6 categories. Number 1, class 1 towns, those having a population of 1 lakh or more. Class 2 towns, those having a population between 50,000 to 99,999. Class 3 towns, those having a population between 20,000 and 49,999. Class 4 towns, those having a population between 10,000 and 19,999, and class 5, those having a population between 5,000 and 9,999, and the last one, the class 6, those having a population below 5,000. The process of urbanization has a long history. It was originated during the prehistoric period when man started domestication of plants and animals around 10,000 years BC. The cultivation of plants enabled men to change their economy, to produce food and to live in permanent settlements. There are evidences that show the development of permanent settlements in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Indus Valley Civilization, China and Central America. In all these cases, peasant communities eventually gave rise to urban communities and urban settlements. The well documented urban settlements is Ur in Mesopotamia. The center of the Ur settlement comprised a temple, royal palace and cemetery. Each of the residential areas which surrounded the center had a temple. The main reason for the development of urban settlement was that after the domestication of plants in 8000 BC, the peasants were able to grow more food than a gathering economy could provide and so allow for a growing population. For the first, he had not only a surplus of food, but surplus time and energy, all prerequisites of the diversification of society and division of labor. For some members of the society could in this way be freed from food producing entirely, and the first severance from the soil was made. Moreover, the art of irrigation is one which needs organization. The communities which gave rise to first towns were not haphazard group of people, but fairly closely knit societies. By 3000 BC, there were true urban societies in the Middle East in which some people were manufacturers, some merchants and traders, some officials and some priests. The organization of the society fell into the hands of officials and priests. Possibly through the keeping of temple accounts and observing seasonal cycles, the priestly caste initiated enormous advances in abstract thought to the complex arithmetic and astronomy of these early civilizations. The agricultural surplus, which allows the urban population to divorce itself from food production, the town as a focus of a producing region and as a center for exchange of goods from outside the region, the rise of artisans and manufacturers, the division of labor and the division of society into classes, each with its special classes and each with its special task, and all this reflection of complex organization which makes the town a single unit, though closely connected with its region. Urbanization in USA, Canada, Australia and the Latin American countries was started only after the industrial revolution in Europe. Indian cities in the past have had little of the industrial commercial character of the Western Europe cities. Even today, the character of most Indian cities is not as clear cut as those of Western Europe. In fact, in many of the Indian cities, the rural and urban characteristics tend to merge. Most cities and towns still have many people employed in agriculture. The cities of Kurukshetra and Rohtak in Haryana, Hapur, Modinagar and Muzaffarnagar in UP, Roorkee, Jabalpur, Laskar and Mangalore in Uttaranchal have more than 15% of their total population engaged in agriculture. In general, the countries of Europe, Anglo-America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Israel, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, South Korea, that is mainly in Asia, are among urbanized. Urban population of China is also about 34% of the total population. Rest of the Afro-Asian and Latin American countries have less than 50% of their total population as urban. It may also be said that the countries situated in temperate latitudes are more urbanization than those situated in the tropical regions. At present, the countries that have more than 50% of their population living in urban settlements lie in Latin America, Europe including Russia and Oceania. In the remaining countries of the world, the proportion of urban population varies between 30 and 50%. The countries which have less than 20% of their population as urban are mainly Afghanistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, Oman, Thailand, Vietnam and Yemen. The world's urban population is currently growing at 4 times the rate of the rural population. Between 1990 and 2025, the number of people living in urban areas is projected to double to more than 5 billion. If it does, then almost 2/3 of the world's population will be living in towns and cities. An estimated 90% increase will occur in developing countries. Urbanization is rapid in the fast growing economies of Asia Pacific region, where the average annual urban growth rate is more than 4%. Yet, the fastest urbanization rates are now occurring in some of the least developed countries. Africa has the highest urban growth rate of all world regions, that is about 5% per year. One important feature of today's urbanization is the continuing trend of ever larger metropolitan areas. Megacities are a distinctly modern phenomena, the proliferation of which has spread with the large scale urbanization that has occurred in many countries around the world. Whereas, only 3% of the global population lived in cities in 1800th century, by the end of the 20th century that figure has risen to 47%. This figure is predicted to rise to more than 70% by the second half of the 21st century, a number made even more startling by the fact that the human population is expected to have increased by 2 billion by that point. Historically, the growth of big cities first occurred during the Industrial Revolution, when large numbers of people moved to cities in order to find work, a trend broadly associated with developed nations. In contrast, contemporary megacities are predominantly focused in areas of the world that are the least developed, such as Mumbai. A megacity is an urban area that contains more than 10 million residents. There are currently 33 megacities in the world. The top 5 megacities are all located in Asia. Asia is the continent with the most overall megacities with 19 or 20 if we count Turkey as a part of Asia. Europe has 5 megacities including Istanbul, that is in Turkey. Africa, North America and South America each have 3 megacities. China is the country with the most megacities with 5, that is Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen and Tianjin. Tokyo in Japan is the largest megacity by population, followed by Delhi in India as the second in rank and followed closely by Seoul in the third place. Shanghai in China is the 4th most populated city in the world. The 5th most populated city is Mumbai, which is located in our own country, that is India. A megalopolis or a megapolis is a network of large cities and surrounding metropolitan areas that have become interconnected primarily by transportation, infrastructure development. This results in a continuous flow of development and commerce driven by economic development that supports the collective growth of the region. The term megalopolis was first used in the United States in the 20th century. It was applied to the area from Washington to New York to Boston, also known as the Northeastern Megalopolis, the Northeastern Corridor or Boschwash. This heavily travelled commuter zone has several busy transport hubs, including a dense concentration of highways, airports, railways and ports. In a megalopolis, each city and the surrounding metropolitan area retaining its own identity, but the urban sprawl that results from the geographic proximity of each city links the different areas together. This distinguishes a megalopolis from a megacity, which is an urban agglomeration that includes people living in the immediate suburbs outside of the established border of a single city. There are more megalopolis regions around the world, particularly in Asia. These include examples such as China's Pearl River and Indonesia's Jakarta Bandung metro area. At the current rate of people being added to urban population each year, the local and national governments in the developing countries are unable to provide even the most basic services to urban residents. As estimated, about 25 to 50% of urban inhabitants in developing countries live in impoverished slums and squatter settlements with little or no access to adequate water, sanitation or refuse collection. In such a situation, environmental quality as well as human health and well-being are at risk.